All right, here is session 10, the Leader's Guide. Again, as we always do with our group, summarizing the text in your own words. This gets everybody on the same page. And then this question dealing with the theme of these 3 verses. How do you show the excellencies of God through your actions? And how do you proclaim them through your words? We want the group discussion to center around ways that we show what the Father is like through our actions. We've talked about this a fair amount as a church family, but the discussion helps cement these things in our minds and come up with actions that perhaps work in our rhythms of life, because those are not universal. So we do this every time we ask for forgiveness or we show love to someone who is undeserving. We do this when we approach menial tasks with a sense of calling, and we do them very well. We do this when we gather for services, prioritizing being with church family. We do this when we spend time with someone who is sick or elderly or widowed. We do this as we care for a neighbor or a child that cannot pay us back. And of course, proclaiming the excellencies of God through words, we do so with faith, we do so with hope, as well as showing people how to be reconciled to God through the gospel. All right, so we show that God is important through our words by not complaining and by being hopeful and pointing people to the reality that there is a God. We want to see all of this simplicity. Otherwise, this just becomes one of those things that we talk about but don't do. This is not out of reach for any of us, so make sure that the conversation ends up being very, very practical. Now, the second part of our text, the other side of the coin, is instead of living for the excellencies of God, it is to live for the passions of the flesh. Now, what is most important in this question is that we don't just list obvious sins. We want to recognize that any desire can eclipse our trust in the Father. And what we do is we try to be God and we try to make life work through our desire for control, through our love of money, through our desire to create a good image. Realistically, any sort of worry, anger, envy, slander, all of these things are rooted in a passion, a desire for something. And so you can really get below the surface here, and we're thinking about anything that distracts me from God, has a passion, is looking for satisfaction outside of God. That might be stuff, it might be a relationship, it might be a job. It might just be that I'm worried because I think I should be in control of the universe. It might be in complaint or discontent because I think I've been treated unfairly and that I'm losing sight of the goodness of the Father. You can see how specific this question is, but people might miss it if we don't lead them to understand any of my passions, any of my desires or appetites that takes me away from a spirit of thankfulness and worship to the Father is a passion of the flesh, and it needs to be fought against with the truths of the gospel. So we move to the heart section, and I wrote this paragraph. The passions of the flesh tempt us to believe that we would be complete and satisfied if we had something that God has not given to us. It tempts us to believe that there are some things more important than God. And so we make the specific application. What distracts you from seeing the beauty of the Father? Different language here. This may help us see something different from the previous list. So let the language stand. And we identify any thoughts or passions that are distracting us from rejoicing, praising, worshiping God. And stick with those thoughts. Whatever doesn't lead me to praise is tempting me with idolatry or tempting me to be in control of my life. And so once you get a good list on the table there, then practice gospeling those truths, those passions, practice pushing those things aside with the gospel. And so this text offers us the glorious truth that we are chosen people, royal priesthood, set apart for God, a holy nation, So we think about this new identity and how it frees us from the need to be God personally, uh, the need to be in control, the need to be liked or respected, the need to be successful. All of these things fade when we recognize that we are secure in Jesus Christ, that we're loved and chosen, and we don't have to be afraid. Final question, something for us to do as we go into the next week. Why is the Spirit revealing these things to me today? I retained that part of the question. I changed the second part. How can you alter your habits to show that God is the most important thing in the world to you? So we've gone full circle. The beginning of this text talks to us about seeing a new beauty by gazing on Christ. And it also encourages us to let go of the old toxic ways of living because we have a new way of living. This question is seeking to let your group come up with a plan of how they can start growing and showing people the glory of God and how they can alter their behavior so they're not lying about who God is and what He's doing in their life. There's a way to live that doubts God's goodness. There's a way to live that is preoccupied with hardship or suffering and doesn't see the goodness of God. I want to set that aside so that we can serve God well. All right, a good text. To explain these dynamics, I trust you'll have a very good discussion, and I look forward to being with you next session.